One revelation changed everything. The alien vampire woman claimed me. Jacob walked down the quiet city streets, the faint hum of the evening traffic the only sound that accompanied him. It had been another long day at work, and all he wanted was to get home, sit back, and relax. He didn't expect anything unusual tonight. The sky was dark, the streetlights flickered overhead, casting soft pools of light onto the cracked pavement below. It was the kind of evening where the world felt peaceful, almost too peaceful. As he passed an alleyway, something caught his eye, a figure standing motionless in the shadows. At first, he thought it was just another person, someone who had perhaps taken refuge from the cool night air. But as he drew closer, a strange feeling began to stir in his chest. Something wasn't right. The figure moved and Jacob froze. The woman, if it was even a woman, was tall, almost unnaturally so, with long, dark hair that flowed down her back like liquid midnight. Her skin seemed pale, almost translucent in the dim light, and her eyes were the strangest part. They glowed faintly, a deep crimson that looked like they belonged to something far beyond the realm of human understanding. Jacob's first instinct was to walk away, to turn around and pretend he hadn't seen her, but his feet felt like they were glued to the ground. The woman stepped forward, her movement smooth, almost too graceful. She didn't look human. Her gaze was fixed on him, and as their eyes met, Jacob felt a shiver run down his spine. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly, more out of curiosity than fear. The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she studied him, her eyes flickering with something like amusement, or perhaps it was something darker. Then finally, she spoke in a voice that sent a strange warmth through him, a voice that seemed to hold centuries of secrets. "I am Lyra," she said. "And I've been waiting for you, Jacob." Her words hung in the air, thick and heavy, like a cloud that refused to move. Jacob blinked, trying to make sense of what she had just said. Waiting for him, it didn't make sense. He didn't know her, and yet there was something oddly familiar about her presence. "How do you know my name?" Jacob asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra took another step forward, closing the distance between them. Despite the eerie nature of her appearance, there was something hypnotic about her, something that pulled him in, making him want to trust her, against his better judgment. "I know more than just your name, Jacob," she replied softly. "I know what you are capable of, what you will become." Jacob felt a chill settle in his bones as the words sunk in. "What do you mean by that?" he asked, his mind racing. Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment the air between them seemed to crackle with a strange energy. "You don't realize it yet, but you are part of something much bigger than yourself," she said. "You are not just a man, Jacob. You are the key to something that will change the fate of this world, a world that's been hiding in the shadows for too long." Jacob was about to ask her to explain herself when a loud sound pierced the air, a car skidding to a stop, followed by the sound of footsteps approaching fast. His heart jumped in his chest, and he instinctively stepped back. Out of the darkness, 3 men appeared. They were big, their faces hardened, eyes narrowed in suspicion. They must have been up to no good, and the moment they saw Jacob standing with Lyra, their expressions hardened further. "Hey, what's going on here?" one of the men called out, his voice rough and threatening. Jacob felt a surge of panic, but before he could react, Lyra was already moving. She stepped in front of him, her body shifting with such speed that it was as though she had vanished and reappeared in an instant. The men stopped, their eyes wide with confusion. "Step away," Lyra said, her voice cold as ice. There was an unmistakable power in her tone, something that commanded obedience. The men hesitated, but one of them sneered. "What's the matter with you, girl?" he mocked. "You think you can just order us around?" Before Jacob could blink, Lyra moved again. In the blink of an eye, she was behind the men, her movements impossibly fast. With a quick motion, she shoved the largest one into the wall with such force that the impact sent a crack through the brick. The other 2 men froze, their eyes wide with fear. They had no idea what they were dealing with. The leader of the group grunted, "Get her," and rushed forward, pulling out a knife. But as he lunged at Lyra, she simply sidestepped, effortlessly avoiding his attack. Jacob watched in stunned silence as Lyra moved with inhuman speed. Her actions were almost a blur, graceful, fluid, and deadly. In one swift motion, she disarmed the man and tossed him to the ground. He groaned in pain, his weapon skidding across the pavement. The remaining 2 men, now completely terrified, backed away slowly, but Lyra didn't let them get far. With a final, menacing look, she stepped back, her expression unreadable. Leave, she commanded, her voice unwavering. The men didn't hesitate. They turned and ran, fear in their eyes. Jacob stood there, frozen, unable to fully comprehend what he had just witnessed. What? What are you? Jacob finally managed to ask, his voice barely a whisper. Lyra turned to face him again, her crimson eyes glowing even brighter in the dark. I told you, she said softly. I am Lyra and I'm not from here, but it's not just about me, Jacob, it's about you. Jacob felt his heart race again. Me, I don't understand. What are you talking about? Lyra stepped closer to him, her eyes intense. You're part of something far greater, something ancient. The time has come for you to know the truth. And it's not just about vampires like me. It's about a war that has been going on for centuries. And the fate of humanity is at stake. Jacob's mind spun as the weight of her words began to sink in. A war, he repeated, his throat dry. What do you mean? What's happening? Lyra's gaze softened, though her eyes still held that eerie, otherworldly glow. I wish I had time to explain it all, but there's no time for that now. You are the key, Jacob, the key to stopping something that's been building for a long time. The aliens, my kind, are not the only ones on this planet, and they've been waiting for the right moment to strike. Jacob's blood ran cold. Aliens, you mean you're not human? Lyra shook her head, the faintest of smiles on her lips. No, Jacob, I'm not, but I wish I could be sometimes. But your bloodline, holds the power to end this if you choose to. A long silence stretched between them, and Jacob felt like the weight of the world was pressing down on his shoulders. The woman in front of him was no mere stranger. She was part of something much bigger, something dangerous, and somehow he was now at the center of it all. Choose wisely, Lyra said, her voice low. The fate of humanity is in your hands, whether you want it or not. And just like that, she was gone, disappearing into the night as quickly as she had appeared. Jacob stood alone, the echoes of her words ringing in his ears. What had just happened? Was it real? Or had his mind simply conjured up a nightmare? One thing was certain, though, his life had just changed forever. The next morning, Jacob awoke with a strange feeling lingering in his chest. The events of the previous night felt like a dream, too surreal to be real. But as he sat up in his bed, his eyes fell on the empty chair by his desk, where Lyra had sat only hours before. He rubbed his eyes, unsure of what to make of it. It all seemed impossible, but deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something profound had changed in his life. The city outside his window was waking up as usual. People were hurrying to work. The sounds of car horns and chatter filled the air, and yet to Jacob, the world seemed different. It was as if he had crossed into a place where the rules no longer applied, and he was no longer just an ordinary man. He tried to focus on his usual morning routine, showering, getting dressed, having a quick breakfast, but his mind kept drifting back to Lyra. Her words haunted him. You are the key. He couldn't stop thinking about what she had said. The strange, almost hypnotic way she had spoken. It wasn't just the way she had moved or the power she had shown. It was her presence, something ancient and full of mystery, that pulled him in. But why him? Why was he, an ordinary man, the key to stopping something so dangerous? And who exactly was she? What did she mean by aliens? Everything seemed so far-fetched, yet something told him it was real. The way she had taken down those men with ease was impossible for any normal person. The speed, the strength, he had never seen anything like it. Trying to make sense of it all, Jacob decided to head out and clear his mind. He couldn't stay cooped up inside, thinking about this all day. Maybe some fresh air would help. As he stepped outside, the cool morning breeze hit his face, but it didn't seem to bring the relief he had hoped for. Everywhere he looked, everything seemed normal, too normal, as if the events from the night before had been erased, wiped clean from the world. But when he turned the corner to head toward the bus stop, something caught his eye. There, standing at the far end of the street, was Lyra. She was waiting for him, as if she knew exactly when he would come. He had no idea how she had found him, but it didn't surprise him. Nothing about this situation made sense anymore. She smiled when she saw him approach, that same knowing look in her eyes. "Good morning, Jacob," she said, her voice as calm and smooth as it had been the night before. "I see you've been thinking about what happened." Jacob paused for a moment, unsure of what to say. He had so many questions, but it was hard to put them into words. The weight of her presence was still heavy in his mind. "I don't know what to think," he finally said, shaking his head. "I keep trying to tell myself it was all just some kind of nightmare, but I can't get it out of my head. What do you want from me, Lyra?" Her smile didn't fade. "I don't want anything from you, Jacob. At least not in the way you might think. She took a step closer, her eyes fixed on his. I've been sent to guide you. You are part of something that's far beyond what you know. The revelation is yours to uncover, but first you must understand the truth. Jacob's heart raced, but he stood still, waiting for her to continue. Humans have always been unaware of the true dangers lurking in the shadows, Lyra continued. But not everything you fear is what it seems. My kind, the vampires, we are not the only ones here. We have always coexisted with another race, beings that came to this planet long before your civilization was even a thought. Jacob furrowed his brow, trying to wrap his mind around her words. Other beings, he repeated, unsure of what she meant. Lyra nodded, her eyes growing serious. Yes, the true rulers of this world, the ones who have been controlling humanity's fate for centuries. The alien race I spoke of last night, they've been hiding in plain sight. Manipulating the course of human history, pushing it toward war, division, and chaos. They feed off fear and blood not just from us but from the earth itself, and now they are ready to make their move. Jacob swallowed hard. So you're saying they're aliens? She nodded again. Yes, but it's more complicated than that. They came to Earth long ago in ships that your people thought were just meteor showers. They infiltrated your society, blending in, becoming part of the world without anyone noticing. They've been feeding off humanity's greatest fears, using your own emotions as a power source. Jacob felt a chill run down his spine. This was too much to process. It felt like a story from a science fiction novel, not something that could be real. But the way Lyra spoke, the way she looked at him, made him believe every word. They've been controlling humanity from the shadows, Lyra continued, but they need something. They need a vessel to fully break their shackles, and that's where you come in, Jacob. You have a unique genetic makeup. It's something that no one else has, a dormant power hidden within you. A power that can break their hold, stop them from taking control, and set the world on a different path. Jacob stared at her, his mind reeling. But why me? I'm just an ordinary guy? Lyra shook her head. You are anything but ordinary. Your bloodline is the key to ending this. Your ancestors were part of a group who fought against the aliens when they first arrived. You are the last descendant of that line. The power in your blood can sever their connection to Earth and destroy their influence forever. The weight of her words hit Jacob hard. He felt a mixture of fear and confusion. His family had been nothing extraordinary as far as he knew. There were no hidden secrets, no warrior ancestors that had fought against alien invaders. He had grown up with a normal family, with normal problems. So how could he be connected to something so far out of his realm of understanding? How can I possibly do this? He asked, his voice quiet. Lyra's expression softened, and for a brief moment, Jacob could see the humanity in her eyes. You're stronger than you know, Jacob. You just need to unlock it. The truth is buried deep within you, and once you accept it, you will have the power to fight back. But you must be willing to sacrifice everything to stop them. The idea of facing such an enormous challenge was terrifying. Jacob felt small, insignificant in the face of it all. How could he, a regular man with no special training or skills, possibly take on an ancient alien race? Lyra stepped closer, her voice lowering to a whisper. You don't have to do this alone, Jacob. I will be here to guide you, to help you understand what you need to do. But you must make the choice. The clock is ticking and the alien forces are getting closer. Every second you hesitate, they move closer to their goal. Jacob looked into her eyes, seeing the sincerity there. Despite her terrifying nature, there was a sense of trust building between them. She wasn't just a stranger anymore. She was his guide, his ally in this battle. He exhaled slowly, trying to push down the fear that threatened to overwhelm him. What do I need to do? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra's lips curled into a small smile, a hint of pride in her eyes. First, you need to come with me. There is a place where you can begin to understand the power within you. We must move quickly, Jacob. The revelation is waiting, but it can only be unlocked once you take that first step. And with that, Jacob knew his life had changed forever. He was no longer just a man walking down the street. He was part of something much larger, something far more dangerous. And whether he was ready or not, he had a choice to make: step into the unknown or walk away and let the world continue to fall into darkness. Jacob took a deep breath and made his decision. He wasn't going to run. He couldn't. There was no turning back now. Jacob followed Lyra through the maze of streets, his mind still racing from everything she had told him. The world around him felt unreal, as though he had been thrust into a story that had no clear ending. Every step he took felt like a leap into the unknown. He had never imagined his life would take such a turn, never thought he'd find himself walking alongside an alien vampire, someone who claimed to know the fate of humanity and his own place in it. As they walked, Lyra remained calm, her eyes scanning the area with an intensity that Jacob couldn't help but notice. It wasn't the kind of vigilance he had seen in normal people. It was sharper, more practiced, like she knew dangers were lurking around every corner. They turned into an alleyway, the noise of the city fading behind them. The streets here were quieter, the shadows longer. Jacob could feel the air shift, growing colder. He tried to steady his nerves, but the more Lyra spoke about the alien race and his family's role in stopping them, the heavier the weight on his shoulders became. "Where are we going?" Jacob asked, his voice breaking the silence. "We're going to a safe place," Lyra replied. Her voice was calm, but there was something about the way she spoke that made Jacob uneasy. "A place where you can begin to understand your power." "Power?" Jacob repeated. "What power? I'm just me." Lyra turned to him, her eyes gleaming with a strange, otherworldly light. "You don't understand yet, Jacob, but you will. It's within you. Your bloodline has been protecting humanity for generations, hidden in plain sight, and now the time has come for you to step into your true purpose." They came to an old building, its facade weathered with age. It looked like any other forgotten structure in the city, its windows boarded up, its door rusted with time. Lyra led Jacob to the entrance, her hand pressed firmly against the metal. There was a strange pulse, like a current of energy passing between them, and the door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room inside. The air smelled old and musty, and the sound of their footsteps echoed in the empty space. Jacob hesitated for a moment, his instincts telling him to turn and run, but something in Lyra's steady presence kept him rooted to the spot. She didn't seem to be afraid, so why should he be? "You're not just a man anymore," Lyra said, sensing his hesitation. "You have the potential to change everything, but first you must understand the truth." Inside the room there were various old books, some stacked on shelves, others scattered across tables. In the center of the room stood a large stone pedestal, a strange symbol carved into its surface. The room seemed like it hadn't been touched in centuries, but it was clear that it had been carefully maintained. Lyra walked toward the pedestal and gestured for Jacob to follow. "This is where it begins," she said, her voice taking on a serious tone. Jacob stepped closer, eyeing the strange symbol on the pedestal. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, its curves and lines twisting in ways that seemed unnatural. But as he stared at it, he felt something stir inside him, a deep, resonating pull, like his body recognized the symbol even if his mind didn't. Lyra placed her hand on the symbol, and it glowed faintly, as if alive. Jacob felt a sudden warmth spread through him, his skin tingling. He stepped back in surprise, but Lyra's calm gaze stopped him. "It's time for you to connect," she said softly. "Connect?" Jacob asked, his heart beating faster. Lyra nodded. "Place your hand on the symbol. Let it connect with you. The power within you will awaken. You are the last of your bloodline, Jacob. Your ancestors fought to protect humanity from the aliens. Now it's your turn." Jacob hesitated for a moment, but Lyra's steady gaze encouraged him. He stepped forward, his hand shaking slightly as he reached toward the symbol. The moment his fingers made contact, a flood of images surged through his mind. His vision blurred as ancient memories, his ancestors' memories, flooded his consciousness. He saw flashes of distant battles, men and women standing side by side, fighting against dark, shadowy creatures. He saw them in hidden places, whispering warnings, passing down knowledge, preparing for the day when the alien race would rise again. His heart raced as he felt their struggle, their determination, their pain. He saw the first alien invasion, centuries ago, and the secret war that had been waged in the shadows of human history. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the images stopped. Jacob stumbled back, gasping for air. His head spun, and he had to steady himself against the pedestal to keep from falling. "Are you all right?" Lyra asked, her voice filled with concern. Jacob nodded, though his mind was still reeling from the images he had just experienced. That was real, wasn't it?" he asked, his voice shaky. Lyra didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied him as if weighing his reaction. Finally, she spoke. "Yes, Jacob, that was real. You've seen the history of your bloodline, the legacy that has been passed down to you. Your ancestors were the ones who first fought against the alien race that has been controlling humanity. And now, that fight is yours. Jacob looked at her, trying to comprehend everything he had just learned. The weight of the truth was overwhelming. He had always considered himself an ordinary man, someone with no special abilities or talents. But now, in the space of just a few days, everything had changed. He had seen things that couldn't be explained, and now he was being told that he was part of something far bigger than himself. "But I don't know how to fight this war," he said, his voice filled with doubt. "I'm not a soldier, I don't even know where to begin." "You will learn," Lyra said, her voice firm. "The power within you is dormant, but it's there. We will train you, help you unlock it. But there's no time to waste, Jacob. The aliens are moving faster than we expected. They have agents here on Earth, and they are already preparing for the final stage of their plan. If we don't act now, it will be too late." Jacob felt a knot form in his stomach. He had never asked for any of this. He hadn't wanted to be caught up in a war that seemed so far beyond his understanding. But now it was clear that there was no turning back. He was part of this fight, whether he was ready or not. "I'm not ready," Jacob said, his voice quiet. Lyra's eyes softened, but her determination remained unchanged. "None of us are ready, Jacob, but you are the last hope. You have the power to stop them, to change the future, don't you see? The fate of humanity rests in your hands. You can't run from that." Jacob took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't someone who fought in wars, but as he looked at Lyra, something inside him began to shift. She was right. There was no running. There was no hiding. He had to face this not just for himself, but for everyone. "All right," Jacob said, his voice steadying. "I'll do it, I'll fight." Lyra nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "Good, but be prepared, Jacob. The path ahead will be filled with danger, and there will be moments when you'll question everything. But you have the strength to see it through. I'll be with you every step of the way." As Jacob stood in the old, forgotten room, a sense of resolve settled over him. He had a long journey ahead. The war was just beginning, and it was a war that would decide the future of humanity. He didn't know what the outcome would be, but one thing was clear. He was no longer just an ordinary man. He was a part of something much bigger, something that could change the course of history. Jacob's heart pounded in his chest as he followed Lyra through the dark, winding corridors beneath the city. They had traveled for what felt like hours, the journey growing colder and more unsettling with each passing moment. The once familiar world outside seemed like a distant memory. The streets, the people, everything was now part of a past he had left behind. The present was a shadowy place, filled with secrets and dangers beyond his understanding. Lyra had been a constant presence by his side, guiding him, training him. Over the past few days, Jacob had come to trust her, or at least he had wanted to. She was the only one who seemed to know the truth about the alien race, about his family's legacy and his role in this war. He had learned things about himself, about the power buried deep within him that he never thought possible. But as they walked through the underground maze, a strange feeling settled in his chest. There was a growing tension in the air, something he couldn't quite place. It was as if the walls themselves were watching him. Lyra, usually so calm and confident, seemed different. She was more distant now, her eyes scanning every corner as they passed, and her movements were more hurried. The trust that Jacob had placed in her was beginning to waver, though he didn't know why. They reached a door at the end of the long hallway, a thick, iron-bound door that looked ancient. Lyra pressed her hand against the door, and it slowly creaked open, revealing a large chamber. The room was dimly lit, the shadows stretching long across the stone floor. Inside, there were several people, humans, Jacob assumed, standing near a table cluttered with maps and documents. They looked up when Lyra and Jacob entered. "Lyra," one of the men said, his voice low and filled with respect. "We've been waiting for you." Jacob stepped forward, feeling an odd sense of unease. The people in the room looked normal enough, but there was something in their eyes that seemed too calculating. They studied him like he was some sort of specimen, not a person. Lyra's face softened as she turned to the group. "These are the others," she said, her tone almost reassuring. "The people who are fighting with us, they're the resistance, Jacob." Jacob nodded, but the knot in his stomach tightened. Something wasn't right. He didn't know these people. He had no reason to trust them, even if they were on his side in this war. Lyra motioned to a man at the table, who gestured for Jacob to come closer. "We've gathered information on the alien forces," the man said, his voice steady. Their plan is advancing quickly. The time to act is now. Jacob walked over to the table, trying to focus on the documents spread out before him, but the strange feeling of unease continued to gnaw at him. His eyes flicked back to Lyra. She was standing near the door, her eyes distant, as if lost in thought. "We'll need to move quickly," the man continued, his voice growing more urgent. "The aliens have agents everywhere. They're closer than we thought." Jacob glanced back at Lyra, but this time she wasn't looking at him. Her eyes were fixed on the group gathered around the table. He didn't know what it was, but something in her gaze seemed colder than before. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing through the chamber. Jacob whipped around, his instincts screaming that something was wrong. Lyra was no longer standing by the door. She was now at the center of the room, her posture rigid, her eyes glowing with an intensity he had never seen before. "What's going on?" Jacob asked, his voice tense. The group around him stepped back, their eyes widening with surprise, but Lyra's gaze never left him. A smile, cold and knowing, spread across her face. "You were never meant to win this fight, Jacob," she said, her voice low and chilling. Jacob's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" Lyra took a step forward, her movements deliberate and controlled. "You were always part of the plan, Jacob, but you were never supposed to succeed." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was saying. This couldn't be real. Lyra had been the one to help him, to train him. She had shown him the truth about the aliens, about his power. She had been his ally, his guide, or so he thought. "What do you mean?" Jacob asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra's smile grew wider, but it wasn't a smile of comfort anymore. It was a smile of something darker, something cruel. "You see, Jacob, I am not who you think I am. I was sent to bring you here, to get you to this point. But the truth is, I've always been loyal to the alien race. I've always been one of them." The room seemed to spin around him. His heart pounded in his chest, and his hands trembled. The betrayal he felt in that moment was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Lyra, the woman who had saved him, who had guided him through this nightmare, was one of them. She had been playing him from the very beginning. You lied to me?" Jacob's voice cracked, his throat tight with emotion. Lyra nodded, her expression unreadable. "I never lied, Jacob. I just didn't tell you the whole truth. You were never meant to be the hero in this story. You were just a pawn, a tool to help the aliens achieve their goals. I've done my part. Now it's time for you to do yours." Jacob's mind raced. He had been used, manipulated. Every moment he had spent training, every word of encouragement she had given him, every promise, had been a lie. The weight of the truth pressed down on him, and for a moment he felt as though he might collapse under the pressure. But just as the hopelessness threatened to overtake him, a spark of defiance lit within him. No, he wouldn't let this be the end. Not like this. He had come too far. He wasn't just going to roll over and accept defeat. He took a step back, his eyes scanning the room for an escape. Lyra's people, the ones who had been pretending to be his allies, were closing in, their eyes watching him with cold calculation. But Jacob was done being the pawn. He was done being played. Before anyone could move, Jacob turned and bolted for the door. He didn't know where he was going, but he couldn't stay in this room with them, not after everything that had been revealed. His heart was pounding in his chest, his breath coming in short gasps as he ran. But as he reached for the door, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. His vision blurred, and he staggered backward, collapsing to the floor. His hand instinctively went to his side, and he realized with horror that there was blood, his blood soaking through his shirt. Lyra stood behind him, her eyes cold and indifferent. In her hand was a dagger, its blade gleaming in the low light. "You can't escape, Jacob," she said, her voice soft and almost pitying. "This is where it ends." Jacob gasped for breath, his body weak. But even as the darkness crept in, he refused to give up. The power within him, the power Lyra had helped him unlock, stirred deep inside him, fighting against the poison that was spreading through his body. With all the strength he could muster, Jacob reached out and grabbed Lyra's wrist, twisting it violently. The dagger clattered to the ground, and Lyra's eyes widened in shock. For a brief moment, Jacob felt a surge of strength, a glimpse of the power that had been awakened within him. He pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the pain, and staggered toward the door. He had no idea where he was going, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let Lyra win. Jacob's vision blurred as he stumbled down the narrow hallway, his side still burning from the wound Lyra had inflicted. His breath came in sharp gasps, each step more difficult than the last. But he couldn't stop. He refused to stop. The bitter taste of betrayal lingered in his mouth, but it was the anger, the surge of power that rose within him that kept him moving. He wasn't done, not yet. As he reached the end of the corridor, Jacob's hand shot out, grabbing the metal door handle. His fingers trembled, but he gritted his teeth and wrenched it open. The cold air hit him as the door swung wide, revealing a small, dimly lit room beyond. It was empty, but Jacob knew he couldn't stay there for long. They would be coming for him, hunting him down, and he needed to escape. He glanced over his shoulder. There was no sign of Lyra, but he could feel her presence, lurking in the shadows. Her betrayal had cut deep, but what hurt even more was the realization that she had never truly cared about him. He had been nothing more than a means to an end, a pawn in a game he hadn't understood until it was too late. As the adrenaline surged through his veins, Jacob's mind raced. He had to figure out what to do next. The power inside him was growing stronger, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. He needed more. He needed to understand it, to control it. He didn't know how long he stood there, his hand resting on the cold metal of the doorframe, staring into the empty room. But a sound broke the silence, the faintest echo of footsteps. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. He wasn't alone. Jacob's heart pounded. He couldn't wait any longer. He pushed away from the door and sprinted down the next hallway, his legs shaking beneath him. Every step felt heavier, his wound making each movement more painful. But his mind was set. He had to keep going. He couldn't stop now. As he rounded a corner, he spotted a figure ahead. A man dressed in dark clothes, his face partially hidden by a hood. The figure moved with purpose, and Jacob knew instinctively that this wasn't just anyone. This was one of them, one of the alien agents who had infiltrated Earth, one of the enemies he had to face. The man didn't notice Jacob at first, but as he turned, their eyes locked. For a moment the world seemed to slow, and Jacob felt a strange pull, as if something deep inside him was waking up. He wasn't sure what it was, but the power that had been dormant within him surged, bubbling to the surface. The man raised his hand, and Jacob saw a flash of something metallic. The agent was reaching for a weapon, but Jacob was faster. He instinctively reached out with his mind, feeling the energy around him, and with a thought, the man's weapon was ripped from his hand, sending it skittering across the floor. Jacob's heart raced as he took a step forward. The agent's eyes widened in surprise, but before he could react, Jacob moved again. This time he focused all the power inside him, channeling it through his body. The agent lunged at him, but Jacob was ready. He raised his hands, and the force within him exploded outward, slamming into the agent with incredible force. The man flew backward, crashing into the wall with a sickening thud. Jacob stood there, panting, his body shaking from the effort. He had done it. He had used the power that Lyra had helped him unlock. For a brief moment, he felt a surge of triumph, but it didn't last. The sound of more footsteps reached his ears, and Jacob turned just in time to see two more figures approaching. These weren't just agents, they were something worse. They were the leaders, the ones who had been orchestrating the alien takeover. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and their expressions were cold, calculating. They were here to finish what Lyra had started. Jacob's breath caught in his throat. He had no time to think. His mind raced, searching for an escape, but there was nowhere to run. He was trapped. He turned and bolted down the corridor, but as he did, he felt a sudden, intense pressure in the air. The walls seemed to close in around him. He reached for his side, feeling the burn of his injury, but he couldn't stop now. He had to keep moving. Behind him, the two alien leaders followed, their steps deliberate, their eyes locked on him. They didn't need to rush. They knew Jacob was weakened, and they knew he couldn't outrun them forever. The corridor twisted and turned, but Jacob kept pushing forward. His legs were heavy, his energy drained, but he could feel the power inside him urging him on. He had to use it. He had to fight. Suddenly, the walls around him shifted. The floor beneath his feet trembled as if the very building was alive, reacting to the power within him. Jacob felt a surge of energy, something raw, something primal. He closed his eyes for a moment, focusing on it, letting it flow through him. And then, in an instant, everything changed. A blinding light exploded from within Jacob, a wave of pure energy that rippled through the corridor. The two alien leaders stopped in their tracks, their expressions shifting from confidence to surprise. The energy surged outward, pushing against them, holding them in place. Jacob opened his eyes, feeling the power coursing through him like a river. The strength he had always lacked was now his to command. He could feel the alien leader's resistance, but it wasn't enough. With a single thought, he pushed forward, breaking through their defenses. The leaders screamed in fury as they were thrown back, crashing into the walls with enough force to shake the very foundation of the building. Jacob stood, his body glowing with energy, his breath coming in sharp gasps. He felt alive, but he knew he couldn't keep this up for long. The power was overwhelming, and it was taking everything he had to control it. But he didn't need to hold it forever. He needed to end this. He turned to face the fallen alien leaders. They were struggling to get up, but Jacob was already moving. With every step, the energy inside him pulsed, stronger than ever. He raised his hand, and the air around him crackled with power. "You thought you could control this world," Jacob said, his voice steady despite the chaos inside him. "But you were wrong. This is our world, and I will fight for it." With that, he unleashed the full force of his power. A wave of energy shot from his outstretched hands, enveloping the two leaders in a blinding light. They screamed as the energy tore through them, their bodies disintegrating into dust before Jacob's eyes. The silence that followed was deafening. Jacob stood there panting, his body shaking from the effort. He had done it. He had defeated them. The alien leaders were gone, and with them, the greatest threat to humanity. But as the light faded and the dust settled, Jacob felt a strange emptiness wash over him. He had won, yes, but at what cost? His body was exhausted, his mind stretched to its limits. And even though he had stopped the aliens from taking control of Earth, the fight was far from over. There were others out there, other agents of the alien race who would stop at nothing to complete their mission. Jacob turned, his eyes scanning the dark corridor. He wasn't finished. Not yet. He had made his stand, but the war was just beginning, and he would continue to fight. For the world, for humanity, and for himself. Jacob took a deep breath, his fists clenched at his sides. This was only the beginning.